Joining us now on the program once again is Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic. As this is one of those months of the year that many parents are welcoming their children into the world, and some of those parents then have some lasting after effects after the fact. Carrie, thank you for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on. So, as a therapist at this time of the year, knowing that it's a time when so many parents are giving birth to sometimes their first children or another child in their family, it often brings up the issue of postpartum depression for mothers. What are some of the challenges after giving birth that mothers do face in that regard?
Absolutely. I didn't even know that August is the highest birth month of the year. So what an interesting fact. Postpartum depression has gotten more attention over the years. There are biological and hormonal activities at place in the body that certainly play a role to mood changes. And then additionally, when you add sleeplessness, stress, the anxiety of a new baby, especially any sense of inadequacy or fear that you're not doing the right things or not doing things good enough, is certainly just going to compound a person's experience of depression or anxiety.
And so, what are some strategies that you propose to parents, particularly to mothers, in that situation as they're facing some of those hormonal imbalances that may be kind of messing around with them a little bit as they face their new lifestyle with their first child or a new lifestyle with another child being brought into their family?
Initially, some of the changes, some of the moodiness, some of the baby blues, of course, is so normal. And to remind even your family, I think, people obviously experience a change, and there are people in the family that are very joyful about the new baby, and they may put even additional pressure on the mom. Why aren't you feeling so good? Just to know that there's nothing actually wrong with you. To continue to have conversations with people about how you're doing, making sure you're taking care of yourself and your baby. If in the event that your thoughts or feelings exceed what you would expect to be normal, to also be talking to people about that. If you feel like you need help, if you feel like you're having suicidal thoughts, if you feel like the way you feel in terms of fatigue, emotions, worthlessness is greater than what makes sense, to be sure to be communicating that with your doctor or other professionals, and as family members, to make sure that you're not minimizing that you're being very proactive and responsive if a person is giving you indication that there's something wrong.
We know that the development of a baby in the womb has a massive impact on the hormonal balances of mothers. And certainly, as you've already said, that continues on for some time after childbirth. What about the impact for dads after childbirth too, especially those dads that, for unfortunate circumstances, may end up being single dads, or are in more of a traditional situation? How are they affected in those immediate times after birth as well?
Absolutely, some of the same things. I mean, the transition, the adjustment, the sleep deprivation, the concern, just the heightened anxiety, the concern about the well-being of their partner and the well-being of their baby can be very taxing on people. There is actually some research that states that some men do experience like a version of postpartum depression, and should be monitored for symptoms, especially those dads who may be first time dads a little bit later in their life, late 30s, early 40s, should be monitored because they are at risk for in some cases, postpartum symptoms.
And let's go back to what you said about the impact of the relationship with your partner. That affects both the father and the mother, the father and the father, the mother and the mother, whatever the
Hmm.
situation
Sure.
may be. And especially for those first-time parents, it's a completely new dynamic for them in their life. And as much as you can try to prepare for it, I would imagine until you're actually doing that, until you actually are parenting, you're not really prepared for that. So, what suggestions do you have for these couples, or even just for co-parents, as they deal with this new situation in their life, particularly for new parents?
So, you know me, I've said this many times, happiness equals reality minus expectations. So, of course, the more expectations you pile on to another person, yourselves, or each other, the more miserable you're going to be. So, he should know what I want, or she should be paying attention to me too, or this shouldn't be so hard. Anytime you're saying should, you are delving into extra expectations, and you need to be really careful about that. I think to acknowledge, if there are things you want or need, to be able to communicate them, to problem solve and maybe predict certain problems and try to come up with solutions ahead of time. But that being said, knowing that troubleshooting will be necessary. If we made the plan and we said, hey, we're dedicated to breastfeeding, and then things happen and it changes and we need to switch gears to formula, to be able to allow each other the opportunity to adjust to that transition, to grieve perhaps the loss of what we thought was going to happen that now is not, but also move on and what's healthiest for your family.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic on the Megacast. You can find more information and get in contact with the whole team at the Birmingham Maple Clinic by visiting birminghammaple.com. Birminghammaple.com is their website for all that information. Carrie, going back to kind of a similar topic to postpartum depression, would be those first moments where your kids are really leaving the home. For parents that are for the first time sending their kids off to preschool or even off to kindergarten, and it's the first time that they're really going to be for an extended part of the day away from their parents. What suggestions do you have for them in terms of preparing yourself for that, but also preparing your child to be away from the parents, which have pretty much been, in most traditional situations, their whole world up to that point in their life?
Sure. And certainly for these like pandemic little ones, they've had much more exposure to their parents in this generation than probably any generation before them, within reason. But and I should raise my hand because I got a baby going to kindergarten this this year. I think exactly that. For the parents, there is a grief and a loss, to acknowledge that it's okay to feel emotional, that even if you were you know done out of the baby phase, that it's okay to feel a longing and sentiment and sadness about leaving one phase and moving on to another. I think that every feeling has a place. It's only when one is sort of more intense than everything else that they should really be monitored. But I think we live in a society where we're kind of told to sort of squash those unpleasant emotions, and things should just feel good, that we should sort of have pleasurable or pleasant emotions about everything. But the reality of the situation is that it's always mixed, and it would be mixed for our kids too. Our kids will be both excited and scared about school, as we will be both excited to have them there and concerned. Like, there should always be sort of a duality to our feelings. And anytime you're feeling just one way, that's probably more of a concern, even if that one way is just good. That like anytime you're feeling one way about something, you're probably either denying or ignoring or neglecting some other really pertinent information. It should be a range or a mix, a prism of colors, if you will.
In terms of preparing your kids for that situation, what sort of suggestions do you have of ways that parents can have those discussions with their kids about spending some more time in a different environment, getting to know some other kids their age in a highly social environment, but also kind of respecting the leadership and authority in a new situation of somebody that's outside of their family, which might be a situation these kids are in for the very first time?
Sure, absolutely. Certainly, any kind of exposure, whether it's driving the bus route, or taking a walk up to the bus stop, kind of imagining what it's going to be like, kind of doing some dress rehearsals of what drop off and pick up might be like, exposing them, taking them to the playground, or maybe making some play dates with some other peers that will be in the same ages or stages, are all ways to kind of buffer that transition and just create some familiarity. So again, like I said, when school starts and there are some unpleasant feelings, there should also be some pleasant ones, and familiarity would be one of those pleasant ones.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic on the Megacast. Birminghammaple.com is their website for more information about their services and get in contact with them if you are seeking some mental health assistance or some therapy. 248-646-6659 is their phone number, 248-646-6659. You can also send them an email, info@birminghammaple.com, info@birminghammaple.com, their location on West Big Beaver Road in Troy. Carrie, a couple more minutes with you before we'll say goodbye today. Anything else at this time that you and your colleagues are seeing as common issues in your practice, or things that people out in the community should be considering in their daily life or for themselves and their families, especially as we're now heading out of summer into the fall and kind of getting toward that season where it's not so sunny anymore.
Certainly, that's one thing. I mean, one thing to be aware of as the days get shorter and darker. We were observing this morning, it's a little darker in the morning already. As you approach even going into full day school, perhaps, more time in the office or on screens again, now that you're sort of out of the summer swing. You will expect to see increased incidence of seasonal depression, but the symptoms of that don't really. Kind of volcano over the top until probably more like January and February, but it starts now. It starts as it gets darker. So just making sure you're getting daylight, making sure you're getting time outdoors, making sure, yeah, eating healthy and having good like daytime, nighttime, wake and sleep routines will all buffer that for when it does get darker and you're not just sort of hit with a tsunami of darker, more depressed feelings. I think to kind of encapsulate a bunch of the different conversations we had, whether it's bringing home a new baby or moving into school. I mean, I think one thing we see a lot with families, whether it's because of social media and texting, or it's because of just even our smartphones give us so much access to information, whether it's research or news articles or whatever. There's a lot of giving and receiving of information for one another. So in the case of a new baby, well, you should never co-sleep, or you should absolutely breastfeed, or you should never do this or that. And we're exchanging these informations, and if it's coming in a family, and especially to something like a new mom or a couple of new parents, that information can be so overwhelming, even if it's helpful. And so I think that like a tactic maybe that needs to be worked on amongst families is how to introduce. Like, I may have something to offer, but instead of just sharing it, I need to ask permission. Like, would you like to hear a piece of research I read about this? Or do you want to know what was done back in my day? And giving the people the opportunity to say, you know what, no, thank you. We're not taking any more information right now, or we're trying to digest what we can. But, it's, if someone were to come to your door and present something they're selling, they would ring the doorbell first, and then you would say, either yes, we're here, or politely decline. But somehow in our families, we don't give that opportunity, that little piece of, boundary to just offer those exchanges. And I think, and also just keeping in mind too, like the people in some of the generations that are offering it, there's something developmental happening for them. They want to be helpful. They want to be relevant. They want to be, they don't want to be obsolete in this new family with a new baby, or, the new world with new versions of school and whatever else. So they want to be included, and their way of being included may be to interject information that at times doesn't feel appropriate or maybe aggressive. And so really working with each other with some empathy and some boundaries to make those conversations acceptable, but also not hurtful either way.
Carrie, appreciate your time, appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you so much.